How's it going, folks? Great to be here at S4. I'm Ed Lopez, as mentioned, the consulting SE at Fortinet. One thing that was a little bit belittled, I was actually at Fortinet twice. I actually have over 12 years at Fortinet, 30 years in cybersecurity. I am an ISA IC 62443 certified expert. And I'm here to talk to you today a little bit low level, right? We're talking about, if we're going to take the Purdue model, take the level 1 devices, PLCs, and in a flat network, maybe some small HMIs and stuff. And we're going to talk about potential testing results, looking at some vulnerabilities on those things. Now, one thing I'm going to tell you, in the 30 years I've been in cybersecurity, I say two things to every audience, okay? The first one is a little bit alarming, which is, look, the truth of the matter is you don't require security to create productivity. That's easy. Everybody creates productivity, okay? It's easily done. You need security to maintain productivity, okay, in the face of threats. The second thing I tell people is that nobody wants technology. People want stuff that works, okay, which means that we have to keep it straightforward, simple. It has to make sense. It has to be able to be operated, endure, and alike. So we're going to talk a little bit about this, and I start my talk over. You can read the slide. That's not really, I'm not here to read slides at you. But when you look at the graphic on the right, this is the world that we're facing. We have OT environments, and now we're dealing with IT-OT convergence, right? The big shining light that's coming down, the guys who are trying to attach clouds, the guys who are trying to do SD-WAN and other esoteric things that they want to do. And this is the situation that we're in right now. Maybe that big shining light is the CISO who just took over an OT network. Maybe it's your potential attackers who are coming into play. This is what we're dealing with in this particular environment. We're dealing with convergence. And it doesn't help when you look online. Let's say if you currently go to a CISA site and you look up IT-OT convergence and they point you to a October document from the Australians that basically says IT-OT convergence, don't do it. Okay, that's not 100% useful in our case, but we have to be able to look at the concept of what if an attacker is on your level 1 subnets? What is going to happen here? So we're going to talk a little bit about this methodology. I created a methodology. First off, I have a lot of tools available. Obviously, I have the FortiGuard team. I have, the various Ixias. I have all kinds of things available, but the talk was intended to be, what can you do to show, where the vulnerabilities are and such. So we're going to be taking a look at this a little differently. So IT-OT, you've heard this all the time, a difference in IT and a difference in OT. You can read the slide. It's pretty much standard. Everybody talks about this. I'll tell you one of the real things that I see about IT versus OT. I told this to my children growing up. I told them that there are 4 jobs in the world, okay? You can create product, you can sell product, you can be a product, or you can be a cost. Okay, those are the 4 things. Why am I bringing up in this mindset? Because IT is about cost. It's about constrainment. The truth of the matter is, CISOs who are in IT, you have, yes, everything's, become web and the like, but the truth is it's a cost containment world, right? Why? Because users and app developers and such always find new and creative ways to be stupid. Okay, whereas OT is about creating product. It's about investment. It's about return on investment. It's a different mindset, okay, when you're really looking at this. And that's really part of the difference, is how the people perceive IT versus OT, relative to whether it's a cost or whether it's an investment in product. And that's something I wanted to point out. So let's talk about network performance characteristics and risk. And we're going to take a look at our old friend, the 7-layer OSI model. Why am I bringing this up? Because yes, we talk a lot here about the application space. I have great partners in this space that'll tell you every vulnerability you may be able to find. They're all about here. There are lots of solution sets that integrate to my products and the like. That's not the point. The vulnerabilities exist. We can find them. There's protocol security capabilities. We can find them. But here's the thing. When they're exposed, now we have to look down the stack. We have to look down the stack. We have to say, hey, how many concurrent sessions can that thing handle? What session rate can it handle? Okay, you take a Modbus PLC, and let's say you're polling at 100 millisecond rate. Let's say each poll is a separate TCP session. That's 10 connections per second. Do you know how much bandwidth that is? That's under 2 megabits per second. So even scanning device, much less putting a TCP, it could potentially, cause harm, much less putting a TCP SYN flood against it, right? A TCP SYN flood on TCP port 502 against the Modbus PLC is like putting your 6-year-old in a ring against a professional sumo wrestler. That thing is going down. Okay, this is the thing. We have to look at this. At the network level, every vendor will tell you DHCP is for provisioning. Don't do it. Go to static addressing. Okay, why? Because now you're gonna look. DHCP attacks. I use them at home. It's a great way to get the kids and grandkids off of their PlayStations and stuff. Okay, so it works. DHCP, spoofing MAC addresses. A lot of people don't realize that these devices, you can't configure the MAC addresses. You can't configure ARP tables on them. You can't configure anything other than a default route on them in the network stack. And then physically, it's not, look, first off, physically, look, in OT, we all understand 10 megabit half duplex is still alive and well in our space, okay? But the thing here is, I ask a question, what about communication logic support? Can I, in my ladder logic, say the Ethernet port's down? Okay, it's a good question. So what about the methodology? Like I said, I have tons of tools that I can use. What can you do? Now, this is going to be the part that people are going to cringe about, okay? Let's talk about test tools. Okay, if you're going to do it yourself, a good recommendation is grab Kali Linux. It's free. Okay, it's there, it's out there, has tons of tools, so we'll talk about the tools and capabilities that are there. But the thing is, all the testing performed in this presentation can be done with tools in Kali Linux. In the case of ICS, Industrial Control System specific protocols, look, there are tools available. There are tools for your particular, maybe from the vendor itself, maybe third parties who have developed tools. But the reality is, almost all of these stacks also have a Python library. Okay, I mean, if you want to do Ethernet SIP, there's PyCom 3. If you want to do Modbus, there's PyModbus. If you want to do BACnet, bagpipes, okay? They're there. And quite honestly, between the availability of these libraries and AI today, it's not hard to build an application simulator, okay, to be able to do this. You also have tools like Node-RED and such. This is a double-edged sword. Okay, because people cringe about this. Hey, you're telling people how you can hack stuff. It's like, no, I'm not. This is information that's available. And the reality is your adversaries have these capabilities and more right at their hands. So one thing I do point out in big red letters, do not deploy test tools on your production environment. Okay, that's a quick way to cause problems. So what are we going to do with these? Okay, well, if I'm going to do application level testing, not 100% useful. Like I said, there are a lot of vulnerability scanners out there. They're all over the floor in different rooms here and such. Are all a bunch of great guys. But you can also use Metasploit. You can have fun with it. Just do, on Metasploit framework, just do search SCADA. You'll find tons of tools to be able to attack your devices. But you're going to get varying results depending on your patch levels, depending on your firmware and the like. What about port scanning? Let's find out what's open out there, okay? There are really two that I like. There's another one, Unicorn Stands, pretty good. But I like Nmap because it's better for deep scan. It really gets into the nooks and crannies and finds out what's there. Mass scan is good for fast and broad. So they're both good for different things. Stateful traffic generators, like I said, I have commercial Ixia traffic generator available. T-Rex is available as part of Linux, Kali Linux. There are other devices, including our own product device, that are available as free trials. You can find stateful traffic generators. They're pretty straightforward. Again, application simulators, I just built sets of application simulators using Python tools. It really is not that hard. So then you go down. What if I want to do a DHCP attack? Like I said, DHCPig It's great for getting the kids out in the sunlight, okay? Just wipe out DHCP and they end up going outside. It's great. You can use it for DHCP starvation attacks. EtterCap is good for ARP poisoning and man-in-the-middle. HPing, I like HPing because unlike other DOS tools that are really focused on web and stuff like that, you can use HPing 3 to really broadly go against TCP, UDP, and ICMP. So what did we find? Now, the methodology. Okay, this is a simple setup. What I did was I had my test tools that are available. I had a switch, and I had my devices under test, whether it be a server, a client, or a gateway, generic terms. I mean, PLCs, HMIs, gateways would be protocol converters and the like. But the thing here is being able to look at these. I use a firewall, FortiGate with a virtual wire to be able to scan traffic and such and see what's going on, and also test potential mitigation. But the next thing you got to do, first thing you got to do is you got to get the vendor information. The vendors will tell you things. Now, they'll tell you it in very subtle ways. Okay, they'll tell you that, hey, here's a micro 820 and it can handle 8 concurrent connections. That's what it's designed for. And please, as you can do DHCP but not BootP, and be able to, but you should only use that for provisioning and stuff like that. They'll tell you nice things, but we need to understand what the potential testing parameters are. The second thing, and a lot of people don't do this, is configure the device. Configure it the way you're going to use it, right? Because sometimes things just don't open up unless you actually configure it for use. Perform an intensive TCP UDP scan. And remember that many industrial protocols use ports above 1024. Make sure you're doing full scans on those. Be able to use appropriate application simulators to verify that the device is going to do what you say, what the vendor says it's going to do. That's going to stand up. Finally, use a stateful traffic generator. Let's see what session rates those things can handle. Let's see what happens if we can do a SYN flood and the like. And use other attack tools to see how well the device stands up. So, what did we get? Well, these are the 5 devices I chose because they were available in my secret basement lab at home. So I chose, admittedly, a little bit Rockwell skewed here, and keep in mind, I'm not here bashing vendors. Okay, like I said, productivity, you can be created without security, and Lord knows in OT, we have really, really productive stuff. This is not about vendor bashing. It really isn't. This is about just understanding the truth about these things, that they're house cats that can't be let out in the wild. Okay, so the thing is, you look at the number of Ethernet interfaces. My 5370 has 2, also because it can do it participates in DLR ring and such. Most everything except for the PowerFlex could also support Modbus TCP. The PowerFlex only does Ethernet IP, and you'll notice that because we all may understand, if you're a Rockwell and you understand Ethernet IP, the reality is that class 1 traffic on UDP, whether it be UDP 44818 or UDP 2222, oftentimes is carried on multicast. So that's another dimension that we have to consider. So that's something to do. And you see all of them are really star except for the 5370 that could be star, DLR, ring, linear, PRP. There's a number of different ways you can connect that thing up. So what happened in terms of IP? Well, all of them are configurable via static and DHCP. The only one that couldn't be done by BootP was Micro 820. All of them have no routing support other than default gateway. You cannot add additional routes. You cannot differentiate traffic based on routing. They all point to their default gateway, and that's the only thing, unless it's on their subnet, the only thing they're talking to is the default gateway. IP filtering, generally just not supported. There are no blacklist, whitelist ACLs on any of these devices. They just don't exist. Say they need somebody else to do it for them. DHCP starvation attack. If you have a DHCP node, I run a DHC pig and knock them off the network. They're off the network. Okay, it's pretty straightforward in terms of what's going on here from an IP standpoint. From a TCP standpoint, let's take a look at some of the open ports. Sometimes people don't realize that, yeah, there are FTP servers on these things. Hell, that PowerFlex and the 5370 even have web. Still, they used to be on some of the older ones until they upgraded to firmware. Web traffic was there. So we have to indicate what ports are available. What do we have in terms of ICS protocol ports? Well, you can take a look at it. The Panel View 800, they don't tell you how many sessions, Ethernet IP sessions it can support, but I'll tell you testing shows the answer is 6. Okay, so that's really what you have. Yeah, that's what you have to deal with. In terms of a Micro 820, the Micro 820 is, that thing can support Modbus. They say they can support 24, and yes, that's exactly what they can support, 24. Strangely, on Ethernet IP, they say 24, but you forget about the master provisioning one. That's why it's 25. Okay, so, and then Modicons, they say they can support 8 Modbus clients, that's what they can support. Strangely, in terms of Ethernet IP, they say they can support 8. They actually can support 25, which is kind of strange. And then 5370, you can see the numbers as we go along. It's pretty straightforward. What they say they can support in ICS, what they can actually support. What about session rates? Okay, let's talk a little bit about this. Like I said, 44818 on a panel view, 41 sessions per second in terms of it. 240 for the Micro 820 on 502, 85 for 44818. We can see general trends, right? I mean, Modbus is a polling protocol, so you expect to be able to handle a higher session rate. But what do these session rates mean? Like I said, if you look at the Modicon, it can support 346 sessions per second, which is really cool, even though if you're doing 100 millisecond polling, that's really only up to 10 sessions per second. So, it's actually, pretty useful to see this information. But the reality is, even at that level, it's still sub 10 megabit. Okay, which means if we open up to a SYN flood on open ports, all of these guys went offline and knocked down. It was easy. It was child's play. This is the point. The point is, if your attacker has subnet level access to your level 1 devices, they will take your level 1 devices out. It's just that simple. Okay? And the reality is, look at UDP. Again, a number of ports open. Are they all subject to UDP flooding? Absolutely. They will be UDP flooded. Can they change their MAC addresses? Not one of them. Did anyone have static ARP tables? Not one of them. So are they susceptible to ARP flooding? Yeah, absolutely. Do they have communications logic support? Okay, which means can I programmatically say, hey, the Ethernet port's up or down? And the answer is, well, the panel view will give you errors. The Micro 820 can, the 5370 can, the Modicon and the PowerFlex, no. So the thing you think about the PowerFlex, you have a drive. I take, I do a DOS attack, take out that Ethernet port from being useful, and the real question is, does the motor keep spinning? I don't know. So it becomes a question. So what do we do? What does this all mean to us? Okay. In summary, these devices they're production plays. They lack security features, have minimal networking capabilities. They're designed purely for productivity. OT networks are vulnerable just to basic low-level common cyber threats, not just ICS application threats. Okay, just little stuff. There's no defenses against DOS, DDoS, ARP, spoofing, other types of unauthorized access. And you have to assume if your adversary gets to a subnet level, they are going to own you. It's just that simple. So network-based security is essential. We have to be able to build a framework around these, but we have to be transparent about it, right? Let's be honest. If I come into your space and say, oh, I can protect your environment, but you need to break out your Studio 5000 and change a bunch of IP addresses, you're going to show me the door. Okay, that's just not going to happen. What we need to do is we need to be able, the existing networks are extremely resilient to change. We have to be able to adapt to the environment. We have to put the frameworks around that. I talk a lot, if you come to our room in the 4th floor, I talk a lot about microsegmentation. I talk a lot about being, protocol visibility. I talk a lot about decoys. I do a lot of things that talk about this. So you have to be able to bring this, and first and foremost, you have to talk about microsegmentation at this level. Because the thing that the wildfire that spreads is that layer 2 adjacency between devices. And like I said, you can see from the basic results here, that those protections in the device itself simply do not exist. So what's the hope at the end of this? We can mitigate. We can do things, right? We can control intra-zone traffic, with microsegmentation. We can make those changes. We can provide network access control for static devices. We can do ARP control, proxy ARP. We can do DHCP snooping, IGMP snooping for you multicast fans. We can do these things if you enable microsegmentation. We can defend zones with firewall policies. Okay, and that's not just the 5-tuple filters. We can also include DOS policies, rate limiting policies, QoS policies that are going to defend these devices. We can do multicast, layer 2 firewall policies, because if you're running Profinet RT or if you're running Goose, you need to be able to handle layer 2 protocols. So these are things we need to do. And most importantly, being able to do virtual patching. What's virtual patching? They're sets of IPS signatures that are tuned to your inventory that say if a vulnerability comes into play, rather than breaking out the downtime into toolkit and patching the device, we can simply update a firewall policy to be able to virtually patch that device until you get around to it on your next maintenance schedule. Deception. I cannot understate the value of deception. That has to be in there. These are the devices that are going to scream if somebody touches it. And that way if you're being vulnerable. And then ultimately secure remote access. And we're not talking about VPNs. Okay, this is Ed talking, not necessarily firewall, but VPNs, even though they're 3 letters, they are a 4-letter word. You don't want them. Okay, you want to be able to do secure remote access that's proxy-based. Okay, so that you can strictly define and protect it and be able to have secret management approval chains and the like. So this is my talk, and I am available for questions. Wow, no questions? I was really good trying to get to the timer. Well, listen, I want to thank you all for your time and attention. Please feel free to come visit us up at the Fortinet room up on the 4th floor. Be happy to have in-depth discussions with regard to your requirements. Thank you so much for your time.